Hello, welcome to the Theology Pugcast. It's great to have you here. And I'm C.R. Wiley. I serve a church just outside Portland, Oregon. And I've done a number of things, including write books. And I'm a senior editor at Touchstone Magazine. And I've also been involved with the trades. I had a contractor's license for years and have built a number of things and worked on my own properties. And the reason that's significant is because of the subject of the day. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and have you guys introduce yourselves. Okay, Tom, why don't you start?
I'm Tom Price. I teach theology, Christian ethics at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. I also serve a church in Plainville, Connecticut. And once upon a time, I did a little bit of cabinet making all the way back during my put yourself through school years. So the relationship was something we're talking about, which will come out later. I was familiar with.
Right. Okay, Glenn.
And I'm Glenn Sunshine. I am a retired history professor. I have employed people in the trades. That's as far as I go there. If you saw my hands, you would understand. But I'm a senior fellow at the Colson Center for Christian Worldview. I am also have my own 501c3 ministry. I write. I'm on Substack. I'm a bunch of places.
Okay, well, let's get into the subject of the day, and we're reacting to something by Matthew B. Crawford. He published something on his Substack entitled Craftsmanship in the Culture Industry. So this brings together some things that I think provide us with a lot of food for thought and material to react to. But just to help people understand who Matthew Crawford is, he's the guy who wrote Shop Class's Soulcraft, which was a big hit, kind of a surprise hit. Back, I think it's in 2009, that far back. I've gotten to know Matt a little bit. We kind of hit it off. I was asked to introduce him at the Academy of Philosophy and Letters when he addressed the gathering, and it was an honor to do that. And I was surprised to learn he knew who I was or who I am because he had read my stuff. So that was fun. And we got together again at the Touchstone Conference because I recommended that he speak there. And so we hung out a little bit at that time as well. And I've talked to him about coming on the show, and he'd like to do it, but it's just not convenient for him at this time. He's just moved to Canada from the Bay Area in California. Quite a shocking transition. He fell in love. That'll do it to you. And the woman he fell in love with is from Winnipeg. I think it's Winnipeg. I'm pretty sure it is. But anyway, so he's there now and has not been doing a whole lot in terms of writing, but over the last week or so, he's published a couple of things. And what inspired this particular article is Netflix bid to buy Warner Brothers. So, what does that have to do with working on motorcycles and working with your hands and that kind of stuff, which is, what he addressed in his book, Shop Class's Soulcraft? Well, actually quite a bit, because what Matt is concerned about, and I share this concern, is the craftsmanship that goes into anything that's worth enjoying, whether we're talking about a motorcycle or a film. So his concern is that we've been losing our commitment to various forms of art that require long and dedicated application of oneself to master. So, in other words, you can't do certain things well by just kind of living in the abstract. You actually kind of have to get involved with the stuff you're working with. And in the process of working with the stuff, whether you're talking about writing a book or fixing a motorcycle or producing a film, you actually have to kind of dive in and get your hands dirty, so to speak, and labor long and hard and think about what you're doing in order to produce something worthwhile. And you just can't read a book about it. You can't just live in the world of some kind of ethereal realm and pontificate. You actually need to learn by doing. And that, I think, is what he's concerned about. He's concerned about the fact that Silicon Valley, in its ambition to sort of take over the world with its technologies, is undermining many of the things that are worthwhile that can't be manipulated with ones and zeros. And so consequently, the world of the craftsman is kind of shrinking, and we're losing some really valuable things in the process. Anyway, that's a very kind of 30,000 feet overview of what he's up to. You guys have had a chance to read it. Do you have any kind of immediate reactions to it?
Maybe I'll go first. One of the things that I think just jumped out at me, and this wasn't directly what he was dealing with, but it is something I think a lot of us feel who have lived enough through certain transitions to feel the difference, sense the difference. And that is not just about the way in which craftsmanship and the way in which things are now managed and run, but also our relationship to the things created by or manufactured. I think that's a place where I think a lot of us get frustrated. I'm outside putting up some Christmas things in the yard, and I'm taking a nice hammer to them, and the stakes break. I mean, it's something as simple as a plastic stake used to be something made that, and there was a value to the things we bought because there was investment by the the craftsman. There's something in it. So I think that way, that's a place we all kind of may feel it. That the endless having to buy something over and over again. The trash bag that breaks every time you put trash in it.
Right. Yeah, that's a good observation, Glenn.
Yeah, I was thinking specifically about films. Yeah. And what is really striking is the degree of unoriginality that's coming out of the film. So it's one of the two things that occurred to me. Everything is a remake of an old property, or it's a sequel, or it's a prequel, or let's get a really great new idea. Let's take a story and we're going to make the villain the hero. We're going to turn the villain sympathetic. And you know what? It might have been interesting once, but they just keep doing it over and over.
Yeah.
There's just this total lack of originality. Which hits right on the issue of craftsmanship when it comes to film. That's one of the things that telling a good story and coming up with a good story is one of the things that makes film work. Right. It's almost like we're dealing with Hallmark Channel movies. They're all formulaic.
Right.
Well, I was going to just say there's kind of a parasitic. When the creativity is left out, it becomes parasitic, and they become parodies of the good story. And we see it with religion, right, where you have the drag queen reading this story and desecrating the faith, yet in clergy outfit. They can't come up with their own religion that has the substance and the endurance. They don't have that kind of imaginative capacity. So they have to parody, distort, basically mimic and then parody the thing. But I think this is it's all part of a similar problem.
Yeah, and I think this is a good launching point into getting to this particular matter of Netflix taking over Warner Brothers. So if you think about what
actually, Chris, before we jump into that, let me throw in one other thing. The question that I have is what is the incentive structure that they're operating under?
Right.
So, for example, Hollywood has known for years that G-rated movies make more money than R-rated movies. So why aren't they making G-rated movies? Okay, so that's one of the questions that I have in the back of my mind as we're approaching this.
Yeah, well, I think that takes us in another direction that's worth thinking about. Returning to kind of the situation that we find ourselves in with regard to the lack of originality and sort of the regurgitation of the same old thing over and over again. It's almost a truism that if the Disney company takes over your production, it's going to die. In other words, and the reason it seems, they when they take over like Star Wars, they kill it. When they take over Marvel, they kill it. When they and what they're looking for, it seems to me, um, and I don't know if it's a mystery, is they're looking for sure things. So the idea is that if we take Mary Poppins and redo Mary Poppins again, it's going to be a sure thing because we have all these people out there who already love Mary Poppins. We have, and so you kind of end up pursuing a, uh, a kind of you find yourself in a process where, because you want the sure thing, you're not willing to take any risks. You're consequently not uh, developing anything original and new, because if you did that, you might fail spectacularly.
Except that's exactly what they did. Not only fail spectacularly, but they put in what, well, I'm going to mention him again, the critical drinker, refers to as the message. That there is this very, they seem like what they're really after is woke propaganda.
Yeah, I think that's important, and I don't deny it. At the same time, I'm thinking about craftsmanship from the standpoint that Crawford is trying to get us to think about. So when it comes to, say, let's think about something like again Pixar. So once upon a time, Pixar didn't do sequels. But now it seems like all Pixar does is sequels. And in part, that's due to the fact that the Walt Disney Corporation has taken them over. There was a time, and I've done a little bit of reading on kind of the history of Pixar and what was going on with it. There was they were a leader in the development of computer generated imagery, CGI. Um, and I remember the original film, the feature length film, Toy Story, when it came out, just kind of took the world by storm. If I remember correct, we're talking about as far back as the late 90s, if I remember correctly, or maybe the early 2000s. And, it was followed by a number of other very creative films, like The Incredibles or whatever you want to up, you can think of it just, one after another. But it doesn't seem as though there's the same commitment to originality and storytelling as there once was. And I think there's a parallel in other industries when you turn over the work of, say, a company that is known for building an aircraft like Boeing to people who are not engineers, but who are instead just people with MBAs from important sounding schools like Harvard Business School or something like that. You lose the concern and interest in the product itself. You instead are preoccupied with simply the metrics that you evaluate a business by that make your company desirable and something that will maybe drive up your share price on Wall Street. So you're not really interested in, say, making great aircraft anymore for the sake of great aircraft. Instead, you're interested in pursuing the profits that you think are going to be, most likely to occur by doing the same old thing over and over again, or just maybe lowering costs when it comes to the production of an airplane, rather than really endeavoring to create something new. Now, where this maybe can tie into what you're getting at, Glenn, is I do think that there is a culture, particularly in the arts, that is really taken captive by kind of left wing ideological projects, ideologically driven projects, and so in that situation, you care more about what your peers in the industry think than your audience. So again, you're kind of losing track of something. Something is important, your audience, or you're losing track of the thing that's that has value in itself, like a great film or a really well-made aircraft, which may not make as much money for you in the near term as you would have hoped for, but nevertheless was worth doing because it was just worth doing, if you get my drift.
Well, this puts kind of it's the old dilemma of, it's the old artist with integrity dilemma, right? I mean, do you keep your integrity and not sell out to one of these places,
Right.
sell your story, if you will, because you know what's going to be done with it. I mean, this was the whole, this was Bob Dylan in a nutshell, right? When he pulled the electric guitar out, has always been, claims of his inauthenticity, but there is something going on there that even in those, those ways of commercializing, that this same issue is there. There have been episodes, as we said, good films made through this kind of commercialization. And this is why everyone does want to kind of make a living and have their story told. And sometimes it's done well. But what is it that qualifies when it's done well versus all the other things that compromise the integrity of the artist, but also I think the person who's being entertained by it. So there are times when it happens well. I mean, we can talk about films done well by popular mediums, but on the other hand, we can talk a lot. We could have much longer conversation about them not done well, and it puts the artist or the craftsman in a bad situation. On the one hand, they want to they want the integrity of their work to be kept with its integrity, and they want the value of it and to be received. They think there's a good transaction and a good in that. And yet sometimes the only ways of getting it places is through these vehicles.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to what some people would call the golden age of film, back. Yeah. And the thing about that, this is one of the things I'd really like to hear Matthew Crawford talk about. There was a studio system in place, and the studios cranked out film after film after film. They had a regular stable of people in, regular directors, regular writers, and so on. And so it wasn't exactly managerial the way Matthew Crawford describes it. But it was not really built. It somewhat formulaic. There was a system in place that they were using. Now, that allowed for a great deal of artistic license, actually, within the system. It allowed them to do some incredibly ambitious things that would not be done now.
And there was genuine creativity.
It was creative. Yeah. But it was done within a kind of structure that one would think, by modern parallels, one would think it wouldn't work, but it did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and similarly, you had orchestrations done to most of these films and performed. Mm-hmm. You can listen to miles long of soundtrack of recordings of authentic orchestra played, music pit performed. Music made for these films.
Well, I'm not even thinking of the silence, but yeah.
So, as I think about what you just described, Glenn, if you listen to, say, Orson Welles describe his experiences as a director, he obviously was very frustrated much of the time with the system that he was having to work within. But occasionally, he was able to get what he wanted. And Citizen Kane, of course, is the film that everybody says is the greatest of all time. I'm not saying that everybody says that, but it's often the number one, film when they list greatest films. And everything about it was kind of special, in terms of what the subject matter, but also the photography, the dialogue. It was just kind of nuts, just how kind of, I guess, off the reservation it was.
Yeah. But there is an interesting point there, and this is something I'd be interested in with Crawford as well, because in this case, the cases we're talking about, there are limits that are frustrating, but as we know, frustrating limits are also often the boundary for creativity. It allows the mustering up of imagination to work with what you have, the potential within a confinement, which is exactly what craftsmanship is doing. But then something else is going on with what Crawford's talking about. And in a way, he isn't merely talking about, artists being limited. He's talking about kind of a whole detachment and indifference that enters into the situation that almost makes the art and creativity insignificant.
Yeah, I'd like to read the opening paragraphs of the essay because it gets to what you're just talking about there. But did you have something, Glenn? I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I can. It may come up later. It's not. Okay. It's not directly out of this.
So it's not a real long essay, and the link is in the show notes. But as I noted, the title of the essay is "Craftsmanship in the Culture Industry" on the Netflix bid for Warner Brothers, and it begins. There is a cloud of lousiness that hangs over many products and services these days, though the people responsible for making it or doing it weren't too concerned about the result. Sometimes this can shade over into insouciance or from insouciance to real perversity. As my friend Matt Feeney put it to me about a year ago, capitalism seems to have moved into an actively misanthropic stage. Corporations don't just hate their workers, they hate their customers, which gets us back to what you were talking about, Glenn. Why don't they make things that, actually sell? Next paragraph. I believe one source of it is what you might call alien ownership, in which an enterprise is controlled by parties who have no history with and no special sympathy for the product or service that the firm exists to provide, no emotional or intellectual investment in the craft of it, which was what I was getting at with Boeing. By the way, I know people in Boeing, I know people at Hamilton Standard, and what they say to me is that the engineers don't actually have much input anymore. It's just all a bunch of people who are quants, who are just kind of evaluating everything by the bottom line or whatever. But back in the day, when those industries were getting off the ground, it was the engineers who owned them and ran them and made certain that the products were what they wanted to make or up to the level of quality that they wanted them to be at. So, next paragraph. When it was announced on December 5th that Netflix made an offer to buy Warner Brothers Film Studios and associated properties, many people in Hollywood expressed dismay. The deal has since been contested by Paramount with a hostile takeover of their own. However, the ownership of Warner Brothers, Warner Brothers shakes out, it is worth thinking about the intuitions that caused people in the film and television business to freak out about the prospect of Netflix taking over a major studio. On December 11th, a group of top film producers and other industry players sent a joint letter to congressional representatives urging them to block the deal. It was published anonymously for fear of retaliation by Netflix and expressed skepticism that films produced under Netflix would continue to be released in theaters despite Netflix's assurances. The film industry group pointed out that Netflix incentives are such that they do not want people sitting in theaters, as this represents time not on their platform. The industry letter suggests the whole ecosystem of Hollywood is put at risk with the deal, and the survival of an art form is put in doubt. Now, anyways, so there's a lot going on here in this introduction, but the main thing that he's getting at is this notion of alien ownership, when something is controlled by people who have no real history with it or love for whatever it is that they hold on to or own. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I look at it and I think about Netflix specifically. And this came up in one of our other podcasts. There was a series they did on an IP called The Witcher, intellectual property IP, and it was terrible because they took a pretty fully developed world And they basically threw it out. They threw out the stories and they put in their own agenda. And apparently the showrunners they hired hated the source material.
Yeah.
But this is what happens when you have people who aren't committed to what they're doing and that don't have a history with it, as put it. I mean, they had Henry Cavill in there who knew the lore inside out, and they ignored him. Right. You know, they said he was toxic because he disagreed with the women showrunners.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it kind of gets us back to this idea that there's an ideological component to this, and that in this particular case, the way alien ownership is expressed is not, quants with MBAs against writers, but it's writers against writers, people who really love the source material and people who really hate it. And I can't help but suspect that that's what's going on with Chronicles of Narnia on Netflix. The people that have been entrusted with the stories, I don't have any confidence in, because I don't really believe that they actually like what C.S. Lewis was trying to do and what the stories represent.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's at the level of IP. That's not at the level of business. But you've got to wonder, what's going on with the people who are hiring these people at the business level, at the managerial level. Don't they understand this? You would think they would, but apparently not.
Yeah, yeah. Tom?
Well, there is. I mean, and also, I mean, I'm going to go in this direction, but that the kind of the alienating features are a byproduct of the kind of vision that they have about reality, and this is how it plays out down in the concrete and in the managerial. The alien, the disconnectedness, the non-participatory, non-invested, and so this is the kind of thing that old sociologists, I think, but also theologians of old were warning about. This is where you're going to end up with the kind of commitments that have gone into the sciences that have fashioned and formed the kind of managers and the kinds of business models and relationships that have landed here. On the practical level, we can talk about a million different ways in which that plays out. And the lack of relatedness that is necessary for this to come off well, and you're talking with arts, a relationship between kind of material reality, creativity, a artist or a craftsman, and a person to receive it and value it. Those things are interconnected realities. And there is hierarchies of value steeped in those relationships. And when we flattened that out, and it really becomes, it really does become something in which these things can't connect well, if at all. And where they are connecting, it's in the wrong places, the woke ideology, or just the bad story, or who cares how it comes out as long as we can get through the next business decision. I mean, this kind of reductionism and detachment connected. But we do, I think he's right on the mark where, we feel it everywhere. He's giving a good example, but I mean, you wait in line at a grocery store, you're feeling the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just when you have to check out your own groceries and bag them. I mean, some people like it, get out, don't have to wait. But on the flip side, the human connectedness and the connectedness to what you're buying and the quality of it and everything else is impacted. So, but when it comes to something that hits everyone, especially now, Netflix, I mean, it is in everyone's home. You're talking a spread of that. They're spreading through that relationship and the stuff they're producing, the same kinds of relationships, and we're being filled with them.
Yeah, I just this morning read something by Tony Esolen that he submitted for publication at Touchstone, and it gets into this very stuff. He was reflecting upon how Scranton, Pennsylvania, his hometown, has changed over the course of his life. And his point was, it wasn't all that great as a kid. I mean, it was already kind of in its, it was already in a bad place, even 60 years ago. But it's and ostensibly, you could say that maybe things have picked up a bit in terms of the way things look, because everything is shiny But the problem is that nobody has a vested interest in the community anymore. In other words, the old shoe store that was owned by a particular person who lived in the community is no longer there. The drugstore, the grocery store, everything is kind of plopped down from outer space, almost kind of like there by people who don't know Scranton at all and have no history with it, and have no desire to know anything about it, and no interest in actually doing anything that would be in keeping with the character or history of the place. They're just there to extract as much profit as possible with their pre-manufactured approaches to things. And consequently, it's a kind of an impoverishment that occurs even as things maybe look like they're improving. We've all experienced this. You drive across America and you get the same stores everywhere you go, and it's like, okay, I drove all the way to this place to go to another McDonald's.
And actually, that was my illustration, is restaurant chains replacing the local places.
Right.
Madison, Wisconsin, where I got my doctorate, the People's Republic of Madison, an alternative to reality. That was actually their slogan. They were named the best city in the country by, I think it was Fortune magazine, just after I left. When I went back to visit State Street, which runs from the Capitol to the campus, which used to have all these kind of quirky local shops and things like that, pretty much every storefront was taken up by a chain.
Yeah.
It completely destroyed as far as I'm concerned, it completely destroyed State Street. There was nothing distinctive about it anymore.
Yeah.
It's interesting, of all people commenting on this, Sid Vicious from the Sex Pistols, the rock and roll band. And I saw him in an interview where he was talking about his impression of the U.S. He said, when I first came here years ago, I loved it. You could go to each small place and small town, and it had its own flavor and it had its own character. And you felt like they gave you something. Because now it's the same strip mall every single, ride you take. And there is, again, this is the same part of the same processes. And like you said, I think the trade-off is this kind of idolatry of convenience that just, and like you said, there's no risk. I know what I'm going to get there, and I don't know what I'm going to get over here at, this other place that's trying to get off its own feet, but actually bring something distinct to the situation. And it's hard for people in the business and arts world, because there is plenty of very gifted people with a lot to give, and it's crushed by these. It really is.
So I want to return to the article and read the treatment of managerialism. So it goes on for about a page and a half, and it'll give us, again, a lot to work with. But what Crawford is identifying as managerialism as one of the key villains in the story. So he says, but like every other institution subject to managerialism, Netflix is run by cadres of people whose competence is an omnicompetence expressed in an idiom of metrics that is transportable across industries. To repeat a point I made in my last post, the making of widgets is to be optimized by people who have never lovingly held this particular kind of widget in their hand. The lovelessness of managerialism is like a pillow held firmly over the face of culture. And goes on to say, he quotes someone, and then I'm going to jump down. Under managerialism, the thing in itself, here television drama, recedes. All the real action happens at a meta level. But only primary things, concrete things, are lovable. Abstractions and metrics are not. This system ruthlessly selects for mediocrities what will not disturb the system's need for vacancy. That's an interesting thing, need for vacancy. What is he getting at with that? Well, he goes on to explain, the reality deficit that comes from this late form of capitalism tends to back up like a sewer line and come gurgling to the surface, where it soils even the meta layer where metrics are supposed to remain clean. The occasion for Roth's expose of Netflix was the screenwriters and actors strike of 2023. The unions tried to force Netflix and the other streaming services to reveal their numbers so workers could be compensated based on a realistic picture of how much their content was being viewed. The streaming services resisted this tooth and nail. Their business model appears to rely on their ability to keep their metrics unverifiable. Roth quotes a Hollywood insider who says, "Everyone knows the numbers claimed by the streamers are fake. Streamers can do and say whatever they want as a way to test what investors in the broader public will believe." Managerialism is a form of political economy in which the middleman steps in with the claim that he has some special competence through the exercise of which new efficiencies can be realized. This is a great summary, by the way, this particular part. Or some process of production or distribution can be optimized through quantitative rigor. But a funny thing then happens. His metrics can easily come detached from the underlying things they are meant to track. No doubt because the incentives of the manager are tied to metrics rather than directly to the thing. The later orientation is characteristic of the craftsman via internal rewards and satisfactions that are intrinsic to some skilled practice, such as making good television, as opposed to external rewards such as money or social position, and other goods that may be second-order consequences of getting to be really good at something. But you can't get good at something while focused on external rewards. You have to go deep into the practice itself. Now, I think that's profound, and it's true to my experience.
Yeah.
When I think about my own writing, or I think about even preaching, if I think too much about, will this make me successful? Will this make me a lot of money? Will this make me likable? Will this make me famous? Or stuff like that. I lose sight of the thing I'm working on. And I don't attend to it as closely as I should. And consequently, I don't produce something that's as valuable as it could be.
That's right. The old language in theology is, the word love, that knowing and love go together. Why? Well, because form, right? Christ, the form, the eternal logos, and spirit, the pneuma, which is the love, are co-eternal and go together. So all real knowing requires a certain kind of loving, right? Without that kind of loving, you can't know the thing the right way. You're not intimate with it in the right way. This is why even the scriptural language of sexual intimacy in marriage is a knowing, right? There is this kind of knowledge is supposed to be understood that way. With reality is communicating things to you, values and goods that it has built into it as gift. And our reception of it, our relationship to it matters. And how we relate to it. And the craftsman has a peculiar love that they're after. And there is a value of the kind of gift of reality that they're working with. And they're able to pull out potentials there, and in their own contributive way. That's part of the gift. It's part of the magic of existence and what it means to be a human and an image bearer. And also it's a part of entering more deeply into the fabric of reality. And that is, I think, something missing with the picture that he's painting of the detached relation. Is it you're actually not just detaching in terms of your relationship to certain things, but reality has taken a back seat. In reality, he's arguing down to the particular and the details is a gift and something to be loved and received a certain way, related to a certain way.
Right. So let's just think about film for a minute. I've had Mary Poppins on my mind a lot lately because of Dick Van Dyke. In honor of his 100th birthday, my wife and I watched Mary Poppins, which I think is arguably the best film Disney produced. Now, maybe you have a different one that's a favorite, but in terms of just the songs, the characters, the presentation, so much about it is endearing. Obviously, it has a lot to do with Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke, But just the fact that they were recruited to play those roles says something about the production process and the values that were, you know, thought to be important. Now, one of the things about it, because I was intrigued by certain things about the story and I had some questions, I decided to read the original source material. So I actually got the original Mary Poppins, which I believe was published in like 1934 or 5. And the woman who wrote it is her name was P.L. Travers. There's been a movie made about the making of Mary Poppins. I don't know if you guys knew that. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You're muted there,
Muted,
Glenn. I'd like to hear what you were saying there because I'm sure it was good to hear.
Yeah, I've got grandchildren stomping around upstairs, so I was trying to keep the background noise at a minimum. I just said Tom Hanks playing Walt Disney. It's actually a pretty decent movie, and it makes some really interesting points and observations and such. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, the kind of the story about the story or the making of Mary Poppins is that Travers didn't want it to be made into a movie, and Disney pursued her for years to get the rights to the film, to make the film, and the reason is because he had promised to do so to, I think, his kids. I think his kids were big fans of Travers, and he promised that he would make a film about Mary Poppins, and at least according to the story I was told or what I saw online, he worked to make sure that he kept his promise to his kids. But she was a real pain the entire process. And what I'm getting at is that perhaps the reason the story was so good is that she was so hard to please. In other words, the film, because they were working really hard to make her happy. But even after it came out, she wasn't happy. She died unhappy about it, even though she made lots of money from that film. Yeah. But that's the point. It wasn't as though she didn't know that she was going to make a lot of money.
Yeah,
she cared about. She cared about the material so deeply that she was willing to be poorer, and she was willing to just leave it as a book and not see a film made of it.
There's an extension of her person in it, and that is, I think, where the integrity sits, not a detachment. They're an extension of her, and so to not do it well is personal, and you wouldn't have that in many cases today, where even the stories that are written oftentimes are just meant to, what can I make from this? Will this make a great series? Will this do this? You can tell in this case, and from what you're telling me, you can tell that wasn't the primary concern here. Them getting it right, which they never will do, because I mean, how can you, right, with something that is that much a creative aspect of our imaginations and everything else. But on the other hand, it pushes others to be creative and generate and be connected to material in a way because of her being hard to please and not settling for a cheap, exemplification of it.
Yeah, and now I need to preface this with Sunshine's first law of history, which is never learn history from a movie.
Right.
But in the film about the making of it, they did something really interesting. It was called Saving Mr. Banks.
Yes, right.
And the way they presented it, and I have no idea if this is accurate or not, but it was an interesting thing. She was concerned that the father would be presented as the problem, when in actuality the story was about saving the father. And that had to do in this movie with her own experience with her dad.
Yeah, she loved her father, had a deep connection to him. And he was a man who had a problem. He was an alcoholic. But apparently her mother was no angel. And so she didn't have a good relationship with her mother. She actually had a better relationship with her father, even though he had this serious problem. And Mary Poppins was based on a relative who I think was an aunt who would come by every once in a while. And so some of the quirks of Mary Poppins become even more clear in the book. she's vain. She's unwilling to explain herself. She's difficult, almost impossible to please. In fact, the Mary Poppins in the book is a lot less attractive. I like Julie Andrews and her Mary Poppins better than I like the original Mary Poppins in the book. But nevertheless, I do think that all of the extra work that was put into trying to please this impossible to please author is evident in the fact that the final result is, I think, a very good film.
I agree. I'm 100% with you that it's the best thing Disney ever made.
Yeah. Now, I think maybe the second best thing, if we were to stick to the animation, would be Fantasia, which was a flop when it was originally released. But in terms of its artistic execution and integrity, is, I think, the best. Maybe Pinocchio would be the only other one that would compete in my mind when it comes to the animation. But Fantasia was a passion project. It really wasn't about making money.
Yeah. It was actually my son Brendan's favorite movie when he was 2 years old.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
Loved Fantasia. And his son is picking it up now, too.
Yeah. It reminds me of, so I know my oldest son produces our show, and when he hears this, he'll wince or laugh or I'm not sure what. But I remember I left him alone to watch Fantasia, and when we got to the Rite of Spring and the dinosaurs and that scene where the Tyrannosaurus Rex appears, he ran out of that bedroom as scared as any little kid could be.
And see, Brendan and Tristan both, my son and grandson both, were the T-Rex.
Oh, sure. Yeah. But anyway, so fun stuff to think about with little kids. But again, what made it great?
That's probably, by the way, why he's stomping around upstairs right now.
But what made it great wasn't that Walt Disney was trying to figure out how to squeeze another dollar out of his animation studio, but the fact that he said, I want to do this, and I don't care if it makes no money. I'm just going to do it, and try to make it as beautiful and as profound as possible.
And there's something so telling in that, even the limited amount, you're talking about the animation, the limited amount of, let's put it a different way. The difficulties with the kinds of technology they were working with to pull that off was another constraining factor. But again, I think it was one of those constraining factors that allowed for that creativity to do things, reach into the potential that's sitting there and pull it out. Whereas we have, untold amounts, horizons that are basically unlimited now. And there's some creative things going on. But again, nothing like the imaginative worlds created there, nor the ways of connecting story, music, and the way a kid is just pulled in, and even adult pulled into those.
Yeah.
Is incredible. Where now I can tune something out within 2 minutes, even though it has all of the technological, drama and everything else, because it doesn't have that way of capturing.
Yeah. This brings up something that I think is worth maybe further consideration, and that is kind of the disincentives to learn the things you need to learn to be truly a creative person. So, today, when you can just generate a short film with a few prompts, you don't have the same kind of incentive to actually learn how to draw, for example, or write that you had before, when nothing would happen unless you could draw or write, right? So there's that. But at the same time, there is, I think, a little bit of hope that we can hold out. I've seen a couple of things recently that use the new technology, but I think in ways that have integrity. So there was a film that won some awards, an independent film called Flow. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a film that I recommend. It's an animated film. It was made by some people in, I think, Lithuania, of all places. Lithuania, somewhere in Eastern Europe. I don't think it was Estonia. Lithuania is what I think it was. But anyway, and it's just a marvelous film. It's about a cat. and you have this mysterious world that is flooding, and you find the cat just trying to survive in this world where the water level just keeps rising, and he ends up making friends with all kinds of things, from a lemur to a dog. He's just, and there are all these things going on. But all the while while you're watching it, you're wondering, what is this place? And then the beautiful sort of tableau, the kind of the scenery that the story is set in is captivating. But it was a film that was produced by just a handful of people. But because of the technologies that we have now, they were able to produce something that could compete with world-class studios with a lot of money at a fraction of the cost. Then there was something that just came out recently called Snow Bear, and you can actually watch it on YouTube, and it's been nominated for a number of prizes. But it was a passion project by an old traditional animator who used to work for Disney. And when you watch it, you can say, okay, I can see the Disney influence, because the character, the snow bear, the polar bear in the film, looks like a old-fashioned Disney, animated character. But because of the technology that we have now, he was able to create this thing as a kind of sort of a synthesis of computer-generated stuff and his own hand-drawn work. And it's beautiful. And I recommend it. It's got a little bit of a, global warming theme going on with it. But apart from that, it's got a lot of just, appeal at the level of the art and the storytelling that's going on. And there's no voices. I mean, these are all animals.
Yeah, you can see. I mean, there are times people can pull it off. I mean, I like Terrence Malick's work. The Tree of Life. I mean, you're talking someone who kind of really does a lot, like a lot of the Eastern European or some of the kind of Scandinavian filmmakers, the real deep existential questions, but then was able to tie it into an everyday story and an everyday life, and then the film kind of plays with both of those. But yeah, I'd be curious in an example like that one, would that kind of thing even be considered even now, within maybe a decade of it coming out? That it's rare to pull something like that off now.
Yeah, well, and it's got to be a really something you're very passionate about. In the case of Snow Bear, it took this guy 3 years, and he did it all on his own. Obviously, he was working with the tech, but even so, a 3-year project, 11,000 drawings to create this film. I'm in kind of at awe of that kind of dedication. And the risk. I mean, I don't know what kind of money he had supporting him in the work. I haven't done enough research to know, but I had the sense that this was kind of like something that he just had to do, and decided to just take the risk and pursue his dream. So there's still hope, but even so, when we're talking about this particular guy, this is a guy that was trained in the traditional techniques of animation. And where is that today? Is there any place anybody who's younger could go to learn to do what he did? He knows how to do.
Yeah, that I think is an open question. Brendan, my son, was actually interested in possibly doing animation. Working in animated films. I told him, a friend of mine told me at that time that who was in the industry, who said, "Look, the people who work in animation now, it's a sweatshop.
Yeah,
you all you may be doing is the grass, and that's it. So in a lot of ways, the animation industry is probably changed substantially because of AI and CGI and such. But then along with that, even before all of that hit, CGI, I guess, was around at that point. But even before that hit, it was not a place like it was with Disney, where they from what I understand, they treated the animators well. They gave them a great deal of creativity and freedom and that kind of thing in working within the parameters that Disney set. It wasn't the sweatshop kind of thing that it had turned into.
Yeah, I think that I know a little bit about that world. You actually, you of course had a hierarchy. So the lead animators were the ones who created the characters, who did essentially what you would call blocking, sort of like, setting the final expression of a character, and maybe posture, and then you had the fill-in people who would come behind them and essentially do all of the intermediary drawings to take a character from one point to the next. And then that would be like the second tier of animators. And then you would get further and further down, all the way down to the cell painters and that kind of stuff. And then the background artists were a whole different world. They had a whole different kind of ecosystem in terms of how those things were made. One of the reasons I know about this stuff is I wanted to be an animator myself when I was young, and again, it's another one of those things I didn't do that I'm kind of glad I didn't, just because of what's become of that industry.
But it does talk to, a couple of things, I guess. I know we're running short on time, but we have a lot of real artists that listen to this show. I know enough of them I've met, and they do have the integrity with their craftsmanship. We've had even some on the show. The integrity with their craftsmanship and what they do. They love, they're connected to the right things. But it does make it does put another, I say as a Christian who has a certain disposition towards these things, the kinds of value of art and craftsmanship that we should be cultivating as one of the ways in which we inhabit a created, gifted world that is to be received and related to a certain way. And that our value of art and arts and good film and good management, for that matters. And we can't change every single thing, but we can change certain ways of relating. So, what is our responsibility in relationship to what Crawford's saying? And, not as a burden, but as a way of actually, whether it's a pressure to say, look, make good stuff, or it's a way in which we invest in good stuff.
So there's a responsibility even we as consumers have, to support good stuff, and we all fall short on this score. Over the years, my closets have filled up with really cruddy clothes because I've not done what I'm advising people to do here. But at the same time, there have been other times where I've actually, buy once, cry once, where you actually invest in something that's a quality good and that you actually get to enjoy for a long time because it was made well. Right.
Yeah.
So, I think we're all guilty of that. And I think in our better days, we would like to think of ourselves as supporters of high quality goods and craftsmanship, and not shoppers of, the dollar store. But let me just finish our time with a quote from Eugippius. So Matt quotes Eugippius. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Eugippius over there in Germany. He's always commiserating about the state of things politically and culturally in Germany. But this is what he has to say. He says, managerialism is an ever-advancing process of decay, masquerading as an administrative system. And it has become a defining pathology of Western civilization. That's an interesting way of putting it. So getting back to Crawford, he says, following that quotation, one result of this spreading crisis of competence, or the death of craftsmanship as an ethic, or I'm sorry, let me just read that again. One result is a spreading crisis of competence, or the death of craftsmanship as an ethic. Applied to the culture industry, managerialism seems to generate products that are hard to get emotionally invested in. In the case of the Silicon Valley takeover of television, this may even be by design. Now, I think that when you see something that is worth watching, it's not hard to get invested. It's almost as though it's so well done, it's hard to stay uninvested, if you get my drift. Whereas a lot of stuff that's out there, the reverse is true. And I think a good illustration of this is the opening sequence to Once Upon a Time in the West. Sierra Leone's, kind of best known spaghetti western that starred Charles Bronson. But the opening sequence, where it's just there's like maybe 2 or 3 sentences in the whole first 15 minutes of the film. It's just a windmill squeaking. It's a bunch of guys cracking their knuckles. It's a fly buzzing, and all the while there are the credits, and who's starring in the film and this kind of stuff. And then it finishes with the arrival of a train and a gunfight between Charles Bronson and these 3 guys who are there to kill him. But that whole sequence, just in terms of just how it was blocked, how it was filmed, the angles, the faces, everything about it is just so captivating that it, on the one at the same time, is like nothing is happening and yet everything is happening just because it's so well done.
Yeah. Well, and that's a medium kind of unlike any other. I mean, it really is. And that's why I think when it is done well, it is so captivating. And I think it's, like I say, you can have good quality cameras and people doing the work, but that there is a certain kind of distance that doesn't draw you in like that to the detail. And I know some people can, I can over geekify on a film. I can do I can watch Tarkovsky's 3-hour films at just the little angles. And I'm not expecting everybody to appreciate that. But on the other hand, that, just the, just to not value something like that and to skip by it as though it, the time and care to get a scene right doesn't matter. It's a lot.
Yeah. Now I'm going to go out on a limb here and I'm going to blame it on Raiders of the Lost Ark. No, seriously, Raiders changed the pace of movies. You after Raiders, everything started moving faster. You didn't spend the time on atmosphere and those kinds of things. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think you got something there. At the same time, I could watch Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think I've seen it like 5 times or more.
I probably have seen it 5 times too. I mean, but let's be real, it did have an impact.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, we should wrap it up. We've kind of gone over the time limit. So thanks for listening to this episode of the Theology Pugcast, and we hope you enjoyed it. We hope we've produced something with enough quality that you have stayed to this point. And the fact that you are hearing my voice indicates that you have, and so hopefully it's not just because you're long-suffering, but because we actually said things that were interesting. But anyway, if you'd like to support our work, that would be much appreciated. You can go to a link in the show notes to our Patreon page, and there you'll learn about how to do that. Anyway, that's enough for now. I think this might be the last show of 2025. I think this is the last show. But anyway, thank you for being a listener in 2025, and we hope that you will go into 2026 with us and enjoy shows that we produce then. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Theology Pugcast is a ministry of Westminster Presbyterian Church in Battleground, Washington. The Theology Pugcast is produced and edited by Wiley Craft Productions of Nashville, Tennessee.